Welcome back, pet parent. Today, April 1st, marks the first day of National Raw Feeding Week. And I wanted to do something special for you guys for this occasion because I am an avid raw feeder. I am a big advocate of raw feeding. Fresh feeding is where my content lies, but I love raw feeding within fresh feeding. And so I know I've had Kimberly on the show a couple of times in the past, and we've talked about raw feeding, but I thought it would be fun to invite her back on and talk all about myths surrounding raw feeding because there are so many, and I know we won't get to all of them today, but hopefully we'll get to some of the big ones, maybe the ones that aggravate Kimberly the most. So let's jump into it. Kimberly Gauthier is the founder. She's the blogger. She's the incredible woman behind Keep the Tail Wagging. She has two podcasts, Believe in Dog. Wait, no, that's not it. You only have one now?
Erin has two podcasts.
Wait, but you did the one with the Golden Doodle lady.
Yeah, Kathy, both of her dogs passed away all within like 10 months. It was heart-wrenching. I mean, it was heartbreaking for her. I was surprised at how hard it hit me.
Oh,
Because you get to know these dogs and you know that and you know the pain that they're going through, and it was horrifying. It was
I am
horrible.
so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I didn't know that, but I don't see your stuff very often on Instagram.
I have like this week I'm seeing your stuff.
Really?
And yeah,
I think I saw one or two of yours yesterday too.
I don't know what's going on in the social media world, but I will go through phases and I will have to go and find someone to say, did I like unfollow them or something? Because why am I not seeing their stuff anymore? And I'm like, nope, you're right there. I see you more on TikTok than I see it.
Really? Well, I have just come, I think, to the realization that I think my Instagram is shadow banned.
Mhm.
Just in this past week, I've been doing some research and I'm like, why am I not getting the same engagement I was getting a couple of months ago? Why are people not seeing the post as much as and my follower count hasn't changed. So like, what is going on? And I think I might be shadow banned. So I gotta look into that.
You and I should talk offline about Instagram because I had a consultation with someone from Instagram, and I'm trying to share everything that he told me with
That would be wonderful because I actually just signed up for a consultation with them. So I'm like,
it was, right. Start writing down questions.
okay.
Because that talking to him, I was able to, like, the myths that people, as we're talking about, the myths that people have about Instagram, and if you do this, you can't do this. And he cleared everything up for me, and it just opened everything. And after that conversation, this was several months ago, my Instagram has been so much better.
I'm glad to hear that, first of all, because like I know some people get really competitive, but like there's so much room in this space.
Much like you wouldn't believe. I guess that's probably our first myth, is that we're all fighting over a handful of dog and cat owners about feeding, and it's just like it saddens me because I don't see it as much as I used to. And I think the reason why is because I really started taking a huge step back from the raw feeding community, only because I wanted to focus more on my dogs. And I found that when I was constantly like in all these groups and following all these people, it just became overwhelming for me. And I was kind of all over the place. And I remember years ago, I used to do an annual "these are the supplements I give to my dogs" post. And this post was insane, just absolutely insane. And I look back and it makes me laugh because even though I do have a lot of different supplements in their pantry, because yes, my dogs don't have a pantry in the house. I took the third bay of our garage, and that's my dog space for all of their stuff. And so I have set up shelves and have everything organized. But I still only give my dogs a handful of supplements because it's mostly based on what they need rather than based on all of these people telling me, oh, well, this is great and this is great and this is great. And it's like we're all so desperately trying to create the next forever dog that we end up throwing everything at our dogs, and that's not necessary. And so I knew that I needed to take a step back because I was finding myself being way too influenced by everything that I was seeing. And it's expensive to try and buy all of these supplements. So, I mean, I see a lot of people out there who want to start creating content and sharing about raw feeding. And I so highly encourage this because although there are studies, like what is that? The is it dog risk that out of Finland
The one that, yeah.
that studies and and Rodney and Karen are bringing studies. Dr. Connor Brady has an entire book that he references tons of studies. So there are studies, but not many that are directly about the benefits of raw feeding and our pets, only a handful. And I feel like at this time, we're still living in the land of anecdotal evidence. And so we still need more people talking about raw feeding. I mean, even though it's becoming more normalized, we still need new voices because I truly believe that every pet is different. Every pet is unique. And it's astounding how you can be talking to one person about raw feeding and just nothing is connecting, nothing is clicking. But then you come across someone else and everything they say, even if they're pretty much saying the same message, but the way they're saying it, the way they're delivering it just clicks hard with you. And so that's why I feel like we need so many more voices out there talking about raw feeding, talking about their experience. You don't have to be an expert in anything. I mean, I have 2 certifications now and I'm considering getting a third, but I'm not sure. But I do all of this simply for my dogs. I don't plan on offering any consultations. I just love learning and I find it fascinating. So I would love to see other people doing the same things, just sharing their content, sharing the meals and why they give their dogs this thing. And if the answer is I don't know, it just seemed good for the day, that's fine. I mean, but the more of us who are talking about this in a public way, so not inside of a closed raw feeding group, but out publicly, I feel the more people get used to the idea of whether it be raw feeding or fresh food, but get used to the idea of this happening, asking more questions. Although, I mentioned TikTok, I don't use TikTok for my blog. I do post stuff, but I mostly use TikTok for just fun. But when I do post a video, it does get some engagement, not a ton, but it does get some engagement because people are like, either you're going to have people who do the same thing and they're like, oh, great, another person, or you're going to have someone going, oh my God, I didn't know I could do that. And then they're interested. And so it's like, you just never know. You never know when you're going to connect with someone. So going back, there is plenty of room for all of us. We're not competing. If I've said this, I've seen so many other people say collaboration over competition. The 2 crazy cat ladies always say learn, share, and grow. I just really think that the idea that there are too many people already talking about this. There's never going to be enough people talking about this. If there were too many people, then it wouldn't be a big deal if
Yeah.
we wouldn't be getting comments of, oh my God, I would never feed my dog that. Raw meat is dangerous. We're still getting those type of comments. And until that stops, we got to keep going. Until we start seeing dogs living, I won't say 30, but let's just say into their late teens. And I don't mean little dogs, I mean all dogs living into their late teens, early 20s. Until that becomes commonplace, we got to still start creating that content. And it has to be more of us because what I put out there may not resonate with people, but what you put out there may resonate 100% with someone. So it's like the more voices that are out there, the more people we're going to be able to bring into the fold.
I love that. And I so agree. And is all about like who you connect with. Because there are definitely people that like I I like their message, but I just can't I don't click with them, right? And I'm like, I can't, I'm sorry. Like maybe I followed you, but I've got to unfollow you because I just can't.
Yes. Some people can be very aggressive about it. And what's funny is that over the years, I have come to understand why. Like I did a post a while ago about this because it just clicked to me the whole my way or the highway type of personality, where there is only another myth. There's only one way to feed our pets a raw food or fresh food diet. And if you deviate from this, then you're going to be feeding them a deficient diet. You're going to be harming your pet. You're just doing it wrong. You may as well just go back to feeding kibble if that's the case. That type of message. It's so aggressive. It's such a turnoff But over time, I kind of understand, I think I understand where that's coming from. And this is the reason why, again, I will not offer consultations. I'll get on the phone with someone and tell them this is what I do and have a conversation with them, but I will not do consultations because when you know that B, C, and D is what works in this situation, and the person you're working with is doing everything but what you're suggesting, and they keep coming back to you and telling you it's not working. And it's like, well, you're not doing what I say. In that case, you are dealing with a my way or the highway situation. And many people come to raw feeding because a pet is sick. And so, in order to heal and to get them, it's not enough to just say, okay, switch to raw, go to the pet store, pick up some commercial, because this is what I say, go to the pet store, pick up some commercial raw, take the time, start educating yourself about doing it DIY if that's what you want to do, find your sources, the equipment you might need, like an extra freezer or some, what is it, a meat cleaver, a meat grinder, do all of that. Because that's my route. That's what I did. And that's what worked for me. But usually, when someone is coming to raw, it's because their dog has severe allergies, has cancer, or has some type of autoimmune illness. And it's a little bit more than just switching to raw in many of these cases. And that's where I don't want to touch that type of situation simply because I don't have the experience and knowledge to help someone. But the people that I've spoken to, Bronwyn Farley of Dolce. Yeah, I always say Dolce's, and she told me it's Dulce's.
Yeah.
Stop saying Dolce's Legacy.
I know, I do too.
Like she has all of that knowledge and experience, and she knows everything. Like if I had a dog that was sick and I went to her for help, I'm going to follow exactly what she tells me to do if I want to see results. But I can understand why people get home and they sort of like, they start researching for themselves and they see other things and they want to try all these different things. And they feel like, the more I put at my dog, the better. And they're just simply not seeing the results. So I can understand when people come back and go, you have to do it this way. I think it's trickled into just plain raw feeding where people are like, no, you have to do it this way. And if you don't do it this way, how can you possibly be doing it right? But I think in some cases, that message is born from people being frustrated of trying to help someone and help their pet and the person not following the steps that they need a step to follow. And then coming back and being mad because their dog or cat is still not doing well.
Yeah. So much of that resonated. Well, and for so many reasons. First of all, the first thing I want to say and acknowledge, I think that part of the reason why we have this like there's only one way mentality when it comes to pet food specifically, I think that we have just been so heavily indoctrinated, and so have our veterinarians, by the pet food industry for so many decades at this point, that it's like they're the only ones that can do it right. And they have told us that for so long that it is so complicated, and we're the only ones that can get this right to make sure your pets are healthy. And so I think that just in general, that like the way allopathic medicine does the same thing to, holistic or even integrative functional medicine, where, you know, pharmaceuticals are going to fix your problem, right? And if you're not using pharmaceuticals, then everything else is just woo woo, hippie vibes, right? Yeah, but there are so many myths around raw feeding specifically. Some are ingredient based, some are kind of generalized. So I want to try to get to as many as I can.
Sure.
One of them is around aggression.
Yes. Eating raw meat makes our dogs bloodthirsty. When I told my mom that I was switching my dogs to a raw food diet umpteen years ago, that was one of her fears, was that my dog was going to go feral. And I was just like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And I actually had someone at the same time when I first started creating content about raw feeding. I got a really nasty email from someone who accused me of being a dog fighter, and that the only person who would feed their dog raw meat would be someone who was fighting dogs because they want their dogs to be aggressive. And it's not true. That's not how it works. If anything, a dog fed a high carb diet is liable to be more aggressive than a dog fed a raw diet, simply because of the blood sugar spikes. I mean, just for ourselves, I mean, when I am eating a terrible diet, this last year I started cooking more, and I was astounded at how quickly just everything leveled out for me. As someone who has lived with anxiety and depression my entire life, it just went away because I wasn't eating all, I mean, and it wasn't like I was eating a terrible diet. It wasn't going to McDonald's every day, but it was just like there are so many things like the seed oils and the amount of sugar that we consume. I mean, there's so many things that are in our diet that do not help us. And what you said earlier about treating everything with pharmaceuticals, when you go to the doctor, they're not going to say, well, here, maybe if you stop eating blank, blank, and blank and start eating fresh food, you'll do a lot better. No, they're going to prescribe something to you. But I think the same thing goes for our dogs. If our dogs were wild, they would be hunting. I mean, I've seen it with my dog myself. Apollo in the spring and the summer will hunt the rabbits on our property, and it drives me crazy. This past year, he did it. He had a record number. I think he got 3 rabbits that I know of, and he ate them whole. He did not immediately start coming after us. He wasn't salivating and drooling. It wasn't some horror movie. That is what they would do. And I think the whole idea of dogs being carnivores and being predators gets kind of wrapped up into all of that, where yes, my dog is a carnivore. Yes, my dog is a predator. My dog also likes to cuddle on the bed at night. My dog he's also my big old fluffy baby. So it's just, take a step back. I know it can be scary. It seems like the easiest go-to fear to tag people with, but it's just not true.
Yeah, I know. When you're chronically inflamed and you just feel crappy and you have brain fog, like that's not exclusively a human experience. Unfortunately, I think for most wild animals, they don't know what that is like. But for the animals that we've domesticated, they definitely feel the same things we feel when we impose our own whatever we're eating or whatever, however we care for ourselves, and we impose that on them, it definitely trickles down. So you've already mentioned a couple of times about unbalanced meals.
Yes.
And this is a huge topic, I think.
95% of homemade diets aren't balanced.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said for, like, who gets to decide what is balanced and what is for each individual dog, like what their needs are. I think we are so fortunate to live in a time where we can actually test and see if our dogs are having any. And granted, that's something that maybe not everybody can afford to do right now, but that is available to us. And so I don't know. I don't want to take over, but what is your idea? What are your thoughts around balance and the idea that so many people are feeding an unbalanced diet to their dogs?
Well, I do believe that, I remember reading the article. Erin and I actually, is one of our earlier podcast episodes was about the article that most diets are unbalanced. And I would see this quote here and there. And I even saw it on a website. And I asked, where did you get this? Because no one was linking to a study. And Erin's the one that tracked it down. And I think maybe it's UC Davis, California. And we finally found the study. And basically what they did is they found recipes online, recipes in books, and then a few recipes by veterinarians. And they ran them through software and determined that however, like 85%, 95% were deficient in a handful of nutrients. And when you read it, it's not as bad as it seems. The flaw with the study is that you're assuming that if someone buys a cookbook for dogs, they're just going to be making those recipes in that book, or they're just if they find a recipe online, they're just going to only be feeding that recipe, as if we're going to take from kibble where we're just feeding this one kibble every day for the rest of their lives. We're going to feed this one recipe every day for the rest of their lives. And there are situations where someone may be doing that. I know that when I was a new dog owner, a neighbor did a crock pot recipe for his dog. So he wasn't really changing that up. He was just putting that and feeding his dogs, and his dogs were doing great. I think that there is some validity to the idea that most homemade diets aren't balanced. I just disagree with the idea that we need to balance on a daily basis. I don't think that that is natural. I don't think any animal on this planet is consuming a daily balanced diet, with the exception possibly of babies, because they are getting either mother's milk or like, and yeah, I guess that's what it would be. It would be mother's milk, which is going to cover the nutrients that they may not be getting elsewhere. With my dogs, I focus on balance over time. I when I started really paying attention to the topic of balance, my first reaction was to push back and say, I don't need a balanced diet. Why would I feed my dog a balanced diet? But the more I looked into it, the more people I spoke to, the more I understood, okay, this could be a problem. Like if I'm really not understanding what my dogs need, there could be something crucial that's missing. And over time, over 5 or 10 years, I can be regretting that. And so I do want to make sure I'm doing the best that I can. I still get stuck with the balance according to whom. I think that we have a lot of great information out there. I think we have better information today than we did 20 years ago, 40 years ago. So I'm grateful for that. And like, as you mentioned, we can test for it. But when, I have 3 dogs, I don't want to spend $200 per dog every 6 months testing to make sure that I'm hitting their nutritional needs. And I still am stuck with, what are they basing the judgment on? It's like, when I look at, AFCO, we all know that AFCO isn't looking at fresh food. When I look at the NRC, I don't know how much of the NRC is based on fresh food and how much of it's based on processed food. There's also the question of just basically the planet. Our soil isn't as nutrient rich as it used to be. So I go down that rabbit hole, and I can easily talk myself into, I don't have to balance my dog's diet. I don't balance my own diet. So I finally settled on a base mix. That way I felt like I was covering everything that my dogs needed, adding a base mix to an 80-10-10 diet. And then with puppies, until they stopped growing, I felt comfortable feeding them either a commercial diet or a diet formulated by a nutritionist. And that way it was like, that's what you're going to eat. And the dogs that I get, usually it's about until they're about 7 months old. And then I switch them over to my DIY. And that's basically what works for me. I know some people agree, some people disagree. I don't think it's that deep. I mean, I think it's important that we continue educating ourselves, that we stay open to new information, that we try to make sure that, okay, making sure my dogs are getting what they need. But the first probably 2 years of my dog's eating a raw food diet, I was feeding 80-10-10. I thought that was balanced. It wasn't until I just asked someone a question of, where does the omega-3 fatty acids come into this diet? And then and it started snowballing from there. And I made adjustments here and there, but I think balancing over time with adult dogs is where it's at for me. And my dogs have been doing fantastic. And so that's what I understand. I don't want to discourage people from educating themselves, but I also don't want people to be like, I can't do this, because there was an article I saw that said it's too hard to balance a homemade diet. I disagree with that 100%. I think it's very easy to do it. What's hard is doing the spreadsheets or the software, all of, the learning curve of all these different things, which I don't think the average person needs to get involved in that unless they want to.
Yeah. I think for me, what I have found the hardest is, because I do work with clients, is figuring out what is going to work best for them while trying to get as close to like nature as possible. Because I definitely have had clients where I know if I don't give them a complete AFCO balanced recipe, multiple, which I never just do one recipe. I always, emphasize rotating recipes. If I don't give them a complete AFCO balanced recipe, that they are never going to feed anything else other than that. And then I also have had clients where, like, they just get it. And I'm like, okay, we can balance over time and you're going to be fine, right? So that's where I get, and going and knowing, and that not everybody is the same, not every dog is the same, and dogs are going to react very differently to different foods. But balance is definitely something that's still the thing that
Yeah.
I guess I don't struggle with every day, but I try to get right for the person I'm talking to every day.
I think that's the responsible way to look at it. And again, another reason why I don't want to do consultations. The way I feed my dogs is not how I would professionally encourage someone to feed their dogs. Because the way I feed my dogs is something that I've learned over time. I know my dogs very well. I can adapt and adjust very quickly with what's going on with them. There's so many things about my dogs that I do without even thinking about it, without mentioning it. I mean, just something as easy or simple as cleaning the yard and seeing where everybody is with their stool will,
Mm-hmm.
make an adjustments. I have a dog walker and he comes home, or brings my dog back and tells me, oh, this is what, I noticed. I adapt and adjust. And there are so many things that I wouldn't know how to express this to someone, especially someone brand new, because these are things that I've developed over time and learned over time. And like you said, some people get it and they jump right into it and they understand. Other people are still scared. They're basically hearing these myths, they're being discouraged. And so they want some type of comfort in knowing that, hey, this is a balanced diet. I got it from a professional. And that's one of those things where it's too much. It's too hard. Because when you change, I mean, I have the software because I love it, and it's so much fun playing around. But when you change one ingredient, it changes everything else. And if
Mm-hmm.
the dog has sensitivities, it can make it harder to figure. Especially, there's so many dogs out there that are basically allergic to air, and there's so many things that you have to get right. I mean, hearing that dogs have issues with kelp, which is such an important ingredient, is just like, oh my gosh, what do you do? I spoke to someone else whose dog could not have any seafood. And I asked, it's like, what do you do for omegas? And how are you handling that? And because that's my favorite topic, or not, I wouldn't say favorite, but one of my favorite topics, because it's just like, that is so, granted, you can get omega 3s from eggs, but just not at the level that you can from salmon. But if a dog can't have salmon or fish or shellfish,
Yeah.
what are you doing? You
Yeah,
can't, and it's just, there's so many things to think about. It's
there
too,
are.
it's
My
too
gosh, there
much, it's
are.
too hard.
I know. I recently went down that rabbit hole too because I do some I think the universe like brings things to you, right? You didn't necessarily set out to do something, but the universe was like, nope, this is what you're doing. And I would say like 95% of my clients have leaky gut with just boatloads of sensitivities. Those dogs that cannot have any seafood, I'm like, how am I going to get DHA and EPA into this dog? And I kind of begrudgingly had to go down the synthetic rabbit hole because they can make this stuff in a lab now. And I'm like, well, maybe this is better. That I don't know. I'm like, I hate the idea of using synthetics, but we also have to work with the dog in front of us.
Yeah. It's like we have to do the best we can. So
Yeah.
I always, when it comes to synthetics, I always try to, I'm fortunate because my dogs have none in their diet right now. But if something were to change, it's like I would just like to limit the number of synthetics rather than eliminate them altogether. And then I try to make up for the fact that I'm doing synthetics in another way, um, by like making sure that I put some type of additive to their water, that's making, like teeth or something. So their dental health is on point. Anything to just make sure to make up for the fact. And again, it's like one of those things where I think it sounds complicated when someone brand new to raw feeding is like, what else do I have to do? But over time, you just intuitively just adapt and adjust. You just I mean, yeah, I think you do the same for yourself. If you eat something that doesn't make you feel good, you just, okay, I'm not going to eat that anymore. Or or if you have a taste for something, sometimes, because I always believe that if I have a real craving, it's because my body needs it, and so I go and get that. And I think those type of similar things you end up doing for your dog as well.
So I've been debating to ask this question or not because I know you really are honed in on what works for your dogs. But to kind of stay on this balance topic, for a very long time, I thought 5% liver, 5% other secreting organ. But as I have evolved and certifications and working with clients and creating recipes and looking at some of the commercial raw diets that have come out in the past couple of years, I have started feeling more comfortable increasing organ meat amounts as long as the dog can handle it. And I'm wondering what your stance is. You've brought up 80-10-10, and now that we're talking about balance,
Sure.
what
I love
are
this
your thoughts?
topic. I'm having so much fun. This is like great. I don't often just get to talk about food for my dog. So surprisingly, believe it or not, I don't usually talk to other people. I'm usually just making content. But that is such a great question. I look at 80-10-10 as an estimate because someone actually on TikTok asked me, what does that look like? Can you do a video showing me what exactly 80-10-10? My video was like, I do mostly meat and I do some bone and I do some organ. And that's basically my 80-10-10. I used to calculate it out and figure out the weight, and I don't do that anymore. And the reason why is because nothing ever comes that way. I rarely just get meat. Usually I get meat and bone, and then I get organ separate. Or I get meat, bone, and organ, but it's not enough organ, so I'm adding in additional organ. So my dog's diet can be at minimal 10% organ meat and go up to 15. And actually, I just recently did a meal prep pheasant and I thought out too much organ meat for what I had. And I was just like trying to decide if I wanted to just use part of it and put it back in the freezer. But I was like, you know what? It's not that much, too much. So I went ahead and put it all in there to see if everyone can do it. And they did it just fine. My thought is that because I balance over time, and to me, overtime can be over a week, it can be over a month. It's just basically over the life of my dogs. They're getting a variety of different things. And I switch up the main protein on a weekly basis. So for instance, this week they're doing beef and turkey. And next week maybe they'll do venison and something. And the week after they'll do my organ heavy pheasant. But it comes and goes and their body adjusts and adapts for it and they do just fine. I'm also the type of person who does not think that you have to have multiple secreting organs. I get why people say that because they're so nutrient rich. However, not everyone has access to multiple secreting organs. And what I think when we say these things as if it's law, we alienate people and put because there's like, well, I can't do that. And so they just figure they can't feed raw. I also feed heart as an organ meat. And it's a muscular organ. And a lot of people are like, well, no, it's a muscle meat. You're supposed to feed it as a muscle meat. And I'm like, no, I don't. The reason why is because heart is also very rich. In my opinion, a muscle meat is something that's the main part of the diet. I would never ever feed heart as the main part of my dog's diet because it would be diarrhea city all over the place. So I feed it as an organ meat. I usually mix heart, liver, kidney, and spleen. When I'm asking for like from local farms, when they're like, what organs do you want? Those are the organs I ask for and I grind them up and mix them together as the organ meat. I don't think about how much it is. It's mostly liver because a liver is huge, but I don't worry about how much of everything is. Each batch that I get is a little different because what I receive from the farm is a little bit different. And I've just learned to accept that my dogs are getting what they're getting. I'm sure that I could, like, I've had my recipes reviewed, but even the recipes I had reviewed are not what I'm feeding my dogs today. Because again, it depends. Everything depends on what I add to my organ mix. That changes how much base mix I add, changes whether I add boiled oysters for zinc or not, changes. That every single protein changes. So I just go for variety and I try to get as much without going overboard with my dogs and there as possible because I do believe that the organs are where all their vitamins and minerals are really going to be. That's the powerhouse. And so I want to make sure they get it. But as you said, I just want to make sure that I hit their limit because otherwise that's when you get the loose stool, the diarrhea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much wiggle room. And I think that's kind of the point of this episode is to just say there is so much wiggle room.
There is.
So to stay on the topic of individual ingredients, there are still many, many people out there who are raw feeders who are adamantly against feeding vegetables. And we haven't brought this up yet.
I did not know this until recently. And I don't remember where I saw it. I don't know if it's on one of my posts or in a group, or I don't know where it was, but I saw that and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's still a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, hey, you do you, boo. But no, my dogs, like I did share the post. Someone sent it to me about wolves and how they don't eat the stomach contents at this one, I don't know if it was Yellowstone or
Mm-hmm.
something. First of all, my dogs aren't wolves. Their diet is inspired by that of a wolf, but then I adapt and adjust because I have domesticated dogs. The reason why I add vegetables is because it's an excellent source of fiber. I add them for the antioxidants. I feel like it pushes you over the top when it comes to certain nutrients a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, let's just make sure we got everything. And then there's just all these really amazing benefits that my dogs can get from vegetables. If they're fermented, then I'm taking care of the gut health. I'm making sure that they have a diverse gut microbiome. It's so much better to use vegetables or fermented vegetables or going back and forth between both over a supplement because you're working with the dog's native gut bacteria. And so if you have a dog that already has a really, they're not super compromised, you can just keep it going with vegetables. And it's funny because I posted an image and a local veterinarian who is like my hero. She commented, and so I was just like, "Oh my God, Dr. Donna commented on my post," but she just commented, "Where are the vegetables?" And I was like, "They're mixed in because I do a grind." But yeah, they're there. And what's funny is that I add way more vegetables than a lot of people recommend because there's my base mix, but then I also use Gussie's gut, which I now alternate with the useful grasses and sprouts. Sometimes, in the summertime, I grow my own garden and I just basically grind up the vegetables every month and they're all in my freezer and I use them year round. And so whenever I'm doing a meal prep, I'm doing my base mix, but I also will thaw out a jar of vegetables and pour that into my meal prep as well. So and then on top of that, I'm using Gussie's gut. So I am vegetable heavy in this house. And the reason why is because there are just so many amazing benefits. And I look at it as my dogs are being hit with, a toxic world. They aren't, although my dogs do have a very good life for dogs, like today or this week, I have a cold. So my dogs aren't getting out as much as they normally would. It's, if I'm also very busy with my work, so my dogs aren't getting out as much as they are. So it's sort of cooped up in the house a little bit. They're not living the life that they would live if they were living a perfect wild life that we're trying to replicate. And so I kind of feel like in some cases, the vegetables are making up for what I'm not able to provide my dogs, what their diet isn't able to provide, because, the animals, although my dogs are getting like top of the line grass fed, Washington State is a great state to be in to raise raw fed dogs because we have access to so many things where I live. So they're getting premium meat, but it's still from ground that's not as nutrient rich as it should be. So I feel like I'm making up for that with the vegetables. Should everyone do what I'm doing? Nah, you do you. But I am always just blown away by people who are like, dogs don't need vegetables. My dogs won't eat vegetables. And I'm just like, really? I mean, my dogs very rarely, if I give them a vegetable, very rarely will just, I tried to give them carrots the other day and they were just like, I don't even understand what you're doing right now. It's like they were not interested. But then, like a couple of weeks ago, I dropped a broccoli on the ground, and you would think I had dropped a steak. They were just like, "What is this?" And everyone had broccoli, and we're waiting for more. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think to go back to that study of the wolves that was brought up, there are so many things that we overlook when we just look at the quote unquote results of a study.
Mhm.
in that one, for example, we're completely overlooking the fact that wolves live outdoors, right? And I know you have talked about this before because, Rodney and Karen talk about this so much that the one constant in all of the oldest lived dogs is how much time they spent outdoors. Most of them lived outdoors. And so that does make up for so much when it comes to like the gut microbiome and the immune system health. And like there's so much that we're not taking into account when we're just looking at like they're eating this and those dogs are eating something different, right? Like there's so much not being taken into account when
Well,
we.
it goes to like the belief, and I remember this the first time I ever disagreed with a raw feeder, like where I wrote an article about it and everything. It was years ago, where this guy posted an article, and it was entitled something like "Oprah Winfrey feeds her dogs raw because it prevents cancer," or something like that. And I was just like, first of all, how do you know what Oprah Winfrey feeds her dogs? And why are you saying it prevents cancer? And this is before I even had a dog with cancer, but that was like, if that doesn't make sense to me. It's like, it's just one of those, there's so many reasons why a dog would get cancer. Wouldn't it be great if the only thing all of us had to do was eat fresh food and we would live forever? It's like, it just couldn't be that easy. Um, you know, when I see people post things like, telling people if their dog died, well, you should have fed raw and your dog would have been fine. And it's like, that's not true. I've had two dogs with cancer. They had everything. They had the best diet, the best life, and they still got cancer. And granted, maybe there is something that I was missing. I don't know what it could have been. And I try not to dwell on that. But I also don't want people thinking that raw feeding is as it's going to keep your dog bulletproof. So we do diet, we improve the diet, but we also work on our dogs developing a healthy gut microbiome. We work on making sure they get plenty of exercise. We make sure that they live in a low toxic environment. We make sure that they're getting plenty of rest. We make sure that they touch grass and that they're sniffing and they're engaged. There's so many things that are important because, as you said about the dogs that live outside, I've seen this with kibble fed dogs that live a long life. One of the things personally that I've witnessed with my friends' dogs is these are dogs who they live on land and they're running and active. And I mean, I have a friend whose dog has been dying for several years now because he's getting old, but he still goes on long walks every day. I mean, he's slowed down, but not that a stranger would notice. I notice because I've known this dog for a decade, but a stranger wouldn't notice that he's slowed down. But it's just, they're outside. Sometimes they're just laying in the grass and soaking up the sun. Sometimes they're wandering around the property, but they are exposed to so much outside. And I think that that's, one thing that Dr. Karen Becker said when we interviewed her was that, people who live in the city, for instance, it's like their dogs don't have access to these type of things. And she was like, go hiking or take them to a park and let them just walk around on the grass in the park. There are just so many things that we don't think about when we're trying to get our dogs to live a long, healthy life. We focus so heavily on diet that we forget that there are all these other things that we can be doing too, many of which are free and uncomplicated that we need to add into the equation as well.
Absolutely. Well, I still have a ton of questions, but I'm wondering if there's anything that just like irks you so much that you wanted to bring up, or many things.
I think the thing that drives me absolutely bonkers, and I mean, it does. And it's the reason why, because people always ask, why don't you do this full time? Is this your full time job? No, it's not. And the reason why is because I don't want to depend on social media and my blog for my main income. Because I feel like when you do that, you have to start promoting things a lot. And so one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is this belief that our dogs have to have certain things. Like that you need to buy all of these supplements and you need to buy all of these tools in order to have a healthy dog. And it's so not true. I shouldn't say every, for many supplements that are promoted out there, and even ones that I use, there is a free alternative that the average person can do. It may not be 100% free. There may be some initial outlay, but a great example is I am absolutely in love with the Gussie's Gut New product, Youthful Grasses and Sprouts. I can also grow my own grasses and sprouts. I don't know how to ferment them, but I can grow them myself and add them to my dog's diet. I love Gussie's Gut daily. I could also grow my own vegetables and ferment them and add them to my dog's diet. When it comes to what is it, joint or not joint supplements, digestive supplements. Again, I can use fermented vegetables. I can use raw goat's milk. I can make some kefir. There are a lot of things out there. You don't have to buy the commercial brands of things. You can look and see if you have a goat farm and see how much they charge for their milk and buy milk that way. There are just so many ways you can cut corners. And I think that for a lot of people watching content creators sharing what we're doing, they can get kind of caught up in all of the products on the counter or the things that we're talking about. And I just want people to understand the reason why I'm able to do a lot of these things is because I've been in this business for over a decade. I know a lot of people who are very nice and send me things. I also have a full-time job. So I can go and get these things. I live in an area that is abundant of resources. So I have a lot of friends who are homesteaders who give me things. So I have access to a lot of really great things. But if you can't do what I'm doing, for example, that doesn't mean you can't feed raw or that you can't do a good job. Because when I first started, I learned initially from people who got everything for free. I mean, they were doing roadkill and, basically feeding their dogs carcasses and their dogs were thriving and living long lives. I don't recommend feeding dogs that way, but from that experience, I do understand that it doesn't have to cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars per dog to feed them fresh food.
Well, I think that is, I don't know if you can hear my husband in the background. I apologize if you can.
You would be able to hear Johan in the background.
That actually is a really great place to mention that Kimberly has been on the podcast a couple of times before. Once we did talk about feeding a raw food diet on a budget. So if what Kimberly was just talking about is like, oh, I want to learn more about that and how I can save money, go back and check out that episode. I'll link it in the show notes as well. And I think, gosh, there's so many other things that I wanted to ask you,
if
but
you have time, I have time.
Okay, let's do one more, and I think this one is like top of mind with me because I literally was just creating recipes for somebody and using various bones, and she was like, "Why is like all the proportions of everything is changing?" And I'm like, "Because bones aren't interchangeable." So a lot of people do find recipes and they're like, well, I can't find this ingredient or I don't want to feed this ingredient. Let me just replace it with something, bones being one of them. And for me, that's like, if all you're going by is one recipe, first of all, we need to improve that. But also, no, please don't.
I remember when I used to have a raw feeding group and I've finally given up on, I am just not the type of person that can have a raw feeding group. But I remember someone saying that they don't feed their dogs bone, they just feed their dogs cottage cheese. And I was just like, huh? And at the time, I was a raw feeder, but I hadn't taken any of the certifications. None of that was even around. I think the only certification that was around was COSI. And I didn't know about that. So I'm just sort of like, that doesn't feel right. And I started emailing people like, hey, is this okay? But I was just like, you know what, you do you. But I do find that, like, for instance, people will try and cut corners. So, you'll pay for one recipe and then just swap out the protein. I mean, because technically with my recipes, all I'm doing is swapping out the main protein and everything else is kind of the same. But when you really dig into what I'm doing, my organ blend is always different. The protein, the source might be a little different because I have two sources for pork. I have two sources for beef. So everything changes a little bit. I understand that I am messing up my recipe. Like if I were to actually make it balanced to the T, I would be messing it up by changing anything in that recipe. And I have to basically fix and adjust. And I just don't want to do that. And I'm okay with that. But if you buy one recipe, it's just sort of like if you were to nutrient test your dogs. If you have 4 dogs and you feel they're all eating the exact same diet, I'll just nutrient test one of the dogs and that'll tell me if they're all doing okay. What you're not thinking about is that every dog is different. And so they may be absorbing nutrients differently. And I learned this with my dogs when I tested them, and Rodrigo came back completely different than everyone else. He also had a digestive issue that he needed digestive enzymes in all of his meals in order to absorb nutrients. So that was why his was a little bit off. There could also be illnesses that are happening with a dog that may impact how they're absorbing nutrients or how it presents within a test. You also may have just done something wrong and you may not have noticed, and you're just assuming that because this one dog is fine, or maybe this one dog is a little off, and so now you're assuming all the dogs are off, and that's not the case. It's just sort of like it's so important to treat every dog as an individual. And with each recipe, it's so important to individualize those recipes and understand that although I understand the goal of wanting to save money, it's just not a good idea to assume that if you change one aspect of a recipe, that the rest of it is going to be okay. If your goal is balance per meal, you really have to do the work to balance per meal. And that's where it's one of those where you can either take the time to educate yourself on how to do that, you can invest in formulation software, or you can work with a professional and maybe just explain, hey, my budget is tight. Can you help me figure this out so that I'm not spending all of my money on just the recipe? But yeah, I guess that's all.
Well, and that brings me to what will be my final question for you. And here's my setup for that question. The idea, you were just saying that you could nutrient test one of your dogs and apply it to all of your dogs, made me think of, I've been on a health journey myself, as I know you have as well. And I've been reading so many books on fasting and glucose and what to eat for my cycle and what to eat, like so many things that, and one of the things that popped in my head when you were saying that is that I've learned that just because a food or a drink, because there are a handful that generally speaking won't technically break a fast for most people. That's not true for everyone, depending on your individual gut microbiome. And that was kind of what popped into my head. And so I'm like, okay, this is a good segue into one of the things I'm trying to do this year in the podcast is incorporate just a teeny tiny bit of humans, specifically women, because that's my primary demographic, health, because this is the Pet Parenting Reset, which is, of course, all about making our pets happy and healthy, but part of that is keeping ourselves healthy as well. And so I'm trying to incorporate that a little bit more into the podcast this year. So I'm sure there are a billion things that you have learned from caring for your dogs over the past decade plus that you have realized I can make these adjustments in my life too. And I know you have been on that journey, especially in the past couple of years. What are some of the things that you have found have made like the biggest impact for you in improving your own health?
Decreasing the amount of carbs I consume. I don't eat a carnivore diet, but I do eat a protein heavy diet. So high fat, high protein, low carb diet. And I know that when I do consume, I don't know where my limit is, but I know when I've hit it because I feel like crap and I'm sluggish and all of that. I'm also anemic. So I started, instead of taking synthetic iron tablets, which really never did much for me, I switched to freeze dried organs. And I started with spleen just to get myself to be normalized, went to liver. And then now I'm just doing all organs. And that is amazing. And also real mushrooms. Adding mushrooms to my diet has been absolutely just game changing and immediately so. And the first thing I realized, the first benefit I saw was I've also had severe environmental allergies all my life. And probably this spring, I started real mushrooms. I can't remember which year. I think it was like 2 years ago. I started in the winter. That spring, I was talking on the phone with my boss, and he just noticed I wasn't stuffed up. And I was like, oh. And he's like, oh, did you find a allergy medicine that works? And I was like, no, I'm not taking allergy medicine. And I'm like, why? That's a weird question. And I'm like, it's the mushrooms, I bet you. And sure enough, that made me so happy. But what I found was that even now, like this week, I have a really crappy cold. But I feel like today my colds feel like that feeling of coming down with the cold or that feeling of getting over a cold. I never quite get into just the ugly part of the cold because, and I don't take any cold I should say I rarely take cold medicine, but and going to balance, which we discussed earlier, adding things like making sure I'm getting enough vitamin D in my diet, magnesium in my diet. There's so vitamin K. There's so many things that we as humans aren't getting in our diet. And we sit there and we say things like, I don't balance my diet. Why should I balance my dog's diet? Yet we have anxiety, we have depression, we're, overweight, we're not getting good sleep, we have aches and pains, and we're not thinking about the fact that how much of that goes to what we're consuming. I mean, we're just trusting that the food industry is giving us what we need, that when we go and order, like when I go to restaurants now, I'm hesitant to buy or order so many things because I don't know what it's cooked in. It's like, was it cooked in butter or was it cooked in canola oil? And usually the wait staff doesn't know either. So I find it easier to just, I go out with my friends and I'll have a drink and I'll have something small, but to get most of my food at home where I can now control the ingredients. And so that was another thing, like the sourcing. There's so many things that we can pick up. And truly, I mean, a lot of these things you would think take time, but like my body was like, yes, finally she got it. And like within a month I would see a difference. And now it's been a couple of years and yeah, I feel really great. I sleep great. I actually feel my anxiety happening and can adapt and adjust naturally with CBD oil. Those are the type of things. And it's like I've been doing this with my dogs for over a decade, but it took me all that time to go, I wonder how I'd feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way. Yeah. I've been taking beef organs for close to 3 years now. And I definitely, especially at first, noticed a huge difference. I recently made an adjustment after having I actually had a session with Magical Mutt's Michelle Thomas for my dog, Kim. But she just lets whatever come through. And she spent so much time on me and she was like, you need more fat in your diet. So I have actually been taking uh, fat pills basically. The like kidney suet and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll get some more fat and more avocados, more butter, more tallow. Like I've been really trying to increase the fat in my diet. Apparently, I'm very fat adept.
Well, that's another beautiful thing about TikTok is that I started getting recipes coming through my
Yeah.
feed. And I was just like, especially if it's something simple.
Mm-hmm.
So recently I made these avocado patties and it was 2 avocados in a bowl, mushed them up. I added 1 egg. I can't remember if I added 1 or 2 eggs. I honestly don't remember, but I did add 2 cups of Parmesan cheese, mixed it
Mm-hmm.
all together, smashed it into patties, baked it for 20 minutes, and then ate it with like a burger patty with it. Um, delicious. They were
Yeah,
ahead.
that does sound delicious.
Yeah. And it's just like, this nice, healthy fat and protein meal.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think I'm going to try that. Especially with my hamburger because I am not a huge fan of hamburger meat. I don't like the texture. I'm such a child. I have a child's palate. I would much prefer to eat like a steak or a piece of chicken or something, just that textural difference. So yeah, I have to give myself something to like choke down hamburger meat.
Yeah, I mean, you can eat it as patties. The first video I saw of it, they made fries. They just
Mm,
put it in like in little rectangular thing to make fries, and they had a dip.
yeah,
I don't know what the dip was, but was looking for it on YouTube and found it, and this woman made patties, and she actually used it and made it as a burger, and she used each side. And I
cool.
didn't do it that way, but
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really good. I mean, and so it's like it's kind of fun and easy. Of course, my dogs aren't used to me being in the kitchen unless I'm making something for them. So whenever I'm cooking food, even though they just ate, everyone's parked ready for their next meal. And it's like, no, this is not for you. This is for me.
Well, I love that you're doing that, that you are healthier and happier. You definitely are glowing, and I appreciate that you were kind enough to share some of what you're doing with us. Um, okay, National Raw Feeding Week just started today, April 1st. What is kind of your hope that people take away from National Raw Feeding Week?
Well, usually I interview tons of people every day throughout the week. And to be honest, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. It's so freaking much work with the editing and the scheduling and everything. So this year, I just want to post my recipes. And so I was going to do one every single day just to show people that it's easy. And I want people to just see that this isn't something scary. You can find people to follow. You don't have to make an immediate change if you're not comfortable making a change. When I was new to raw feeding, it took me probably 4 or 5 months, maybe even 6 months before I actually started trying to make a change. But just do one thing, and start going from there and take your time, enjoy the content and understand that there's a lot of stuff that you can pay for. You can pay for courses, you can pay for consultations. But all of us who are in this community, whether we charge for things or not, are sharing free content. So it's like soak it up and get that idea of the things that you have to do. It's not meant to be judgmental. It's not meant to be bullying or pressuring. It's just meant to share and let people know that there is something that you can do, because we love our animals so much. We know that everyone else loves their animals so much, and we want to see them live longer, happy, healthier lives. And diet is one of those paths to getting there. And so, just check us out.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I try to, that's why I started this podcast, is because I try to live by the motto in business that you put your best stuff out there for free, and then people will come find you. And so that's what I've been trying to do with this podcast, is put the best stuff out there for free for people to learn and grow.
Way to say it.
And yeah, like, you could do so much just by listening to, and your podcast, by the way, which I was trying to get out at the beginning, Alternative Dog Moms with Erin.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is I want this week to also be a push for people who are, whether you're feeding raw, cooked, or just adding fresh food to kibble, whatever you're doing to help your dog live a longer, happier, healthier lives. Whether it's, I take my dog hiking every weekend. I want more people to start putting that content out there. I rarely put myself on camera. It's all about my dogs. You don't have to worry about, I don't want to be on camera, or I don't know how to. It's so easy to do this. And what's amazing is that there are so many of us who are more than happy to share tips and tools. I went to coffee with a friend the other day and gave her all of my tips. This is everything that I'm doing to create content that makes it easier. And there's so many free tools out there to help you do it. If you have a smartphone and you have the social media apps, you can start creating content about what you're doing right now. And people will love and appreciate it. You may not become, have a million
Insta
followers.
famous.
Yeah. But to be perfectly honest, do you really want that? Have you ever dove into the comments of someone who is super famous? It's not a fun place to be. But, people, even if it's just family and friends, people will listen. I mean, it's amazing how I've had friends, my friends now call me and stuff where I didn't realize that they followed me, my
Yeah.
friends and family, but they do. And so it's amazing how many people you can impact by just sharing what you're doing. So be brave.
I love that. And thank you so much for being here. And goodness, there's so much, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming, as you have said. And check out Kimberly's content all the time, but especially this week for National Raw Feeding Week, so you can get an idea of how simple it really can be and how you can do it too. Thank you so much for being here, Kimberly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, y'all have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you next week.